RG3 recently was on the podcast and was talking about the team name and how that Dan Snyder was basically giving the fan base and the franchise a big FU on the way out. Welcome back, everybody, to the Washington Commanders Maniacs podcast. I'm changing this podcast name every single day. My name is Greg. I'm your host. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to news and commentary for the Washington Commanders. If you're down with that, please make sure that you have subscribed, and when you do, hit that notification bell so you won't miss any other video releases. So RG3 was recently on the podcast and was talking about Dan Snyder and the renaming of the rebranding of the Washington Redskins into the Washington Commanders. And this is what he had to say in regards to Dan Snyder.
It was a last-second FU from Dan Snyder to the team. He gave him the name that nobody wanted, that didn't come up on the top 5 or whatever, top 3 from the fan base, and he named him that. And here's the other thing. It cost, like, millions. I'm not talking like, you're talking like hundreds of millions of dollars to change a team name.
So, basically, and there's a lot more to this podcast than that little clip it there, but basically, what was being said is that Dan Snyder, I don't think he really cared too much for the Washington Commanders rebrand. He just wanted to rebrand them into something and then sell the team and then let it be somebody else's problems. You know, that would be something that Dan Snyder would do. And as you probably know about Dan Snyder, just a few years ago, he said that the name Redskins would never change. You could put that in all caps, bold letters. And he was very adamant about never changing the name of the franchise. And then he started getting a lot of pressure with sponsors wanting to pull out, especially FedEx led the way, and then Nike. And so he had no choice at that point but to certainly discontinue the name. So he retired the name, retired the logo along with it as well. And so for a year, the Washington Redskins became the Washington football team. People actually started kind of getting used to that, and they kind of liked that. And then the team was turned into the Washington Commanders. A lot of people hated that. They still hate it. You only have, I think, a very minute part of the fan base who love it. It's probably, the part of the fan base that I'm not going to say is like, bought out or a bought from the franchise, but just those, the part of the fan base that goes to every single game. They have season tickets. They are on. You see them on TV a whole lot. They're able to go to the draft, and just people who are dedicated. They've dedicated their money to the franchise, and so and they also have a relationship with the franchise. Guys like Jason Wright knows them and things like that. But other than that, of course they're going to be very supportive of anything the franchise does. And it's not saying that the rest of us do not support the franchise, but I think and it also doesn't mean that the rest of us are not true Washington football fans. I just think that most of us realize that we love the Redskins, and it wasn't just because of the name per se, but it was the whole image. It was just the, Cowboys and Indians thing with the Dallas Cowboys and Washington Redskins every year. Now that's gone. And, those rivals, just the whole thing of keeping the Native American community into the spotlight by having these teams, carrying the moniker of a Native American imagery. And, now you actually see Native American social media accounts out there, organizations that is really wanting to try to change things in terms of wanting to bring the branding back, which will never come back. But maybe it'll at least open up the franchise to consider when they rebrand again, and I believe they will, that they won't be so closed on it can't be anything that has to do with Native American imagery. Because honestly, I think you can be too PC with things, and especially I think you need to have an ear open for the large majority of the Native American population. And I don't think they did. I think that they just listened to the minority loud voices who really were in it for the money, and um, really not listening to the majority of the Native American community who either didn't care about the name, was indifferent, or they it gave them pride. They supported it because they wanted to have their imagery in the forefront so people could see it. And um, nowadays, there's this thing of like, well, we can't really talk about color, so red and then skins. Oh man, that's horrible, without really going through all of the history of it. And I know that there's conflicting stories on the name, and I'm not going to sit here and uh, go through that whole history. You can Google it yourself. But overall, I'm just saying that I think that RG3 was right. I think that Dan Snyder, he didn't like the Commanders um, rebrand. I think he was just like, I don't care. I'm on my way out anyway, and let's just pick that because I don't want to have to deal with. I don't want to be the one to have to go through all of this and then turn around and sell the team. So let's just go with Commanders as the easiest point. We'll just say that it is more marketable than any of the other team names, and maybe it would have been initially because it's so generic. But at the same time, I think that really giving your fans what they wanted, and I think most fans wanted either some form of Red Wolves, Hogs, whatever it was. They didn't want anything sterile. And I think a lot of times that's what a lot of us Commanders fans see of the name is it's just sterile. That it's not going to hurt anybody. And I look back on other team names and I'm like Vikings. They were definitely a nice Christian punch, right? I mean, no one talks about Vikings. No one really, no one talks about Raiders, Buccaneers. I mean, these were not very good people, and they're being glorified on NFL team names. So, really, I think it just comes down to honestly, I think Dan Snyder was targeted, being the bad person he was allegedly was, and so when it came down to getting rid of what, if they couldn't get him out of Washington, they were going to make it to where it wasn't really the team that he bought. It's not going to be Redskins anymore. We're taking that from you. And so Dan Snyder's parting FU was, well, okay, guess what? I'll rename it. I'll rename it something that none of the fans are going to like. That, yeah, you may think it's more marketable, but really nobody's going to like the name at all. I'm going to name it Commanders and leave it at that. So let me know in the comments what you think. Do you really love the name? We know we can't go back to Redskins, but I mean, what would you have named it? I was a Red Wolves fan. I liked it. I liked the Red Tails. I liked the Red Hawks. I like a lot of that stuff. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think. That said, I will see you in the next podcast.